Okay, so let's get right into it. There's this term floating around, consensual non-monogamy, or CNM, and millions of people are exploring it. But the thing is, it's a topic that's still really shrouded in mystery and honestly, a lot of misconceptions. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain and look at what the actual research has to say.
And get this, it might be way more common than you think. A recent study found that 31% of American singles have actually explored consensual non-monogamy at some point. That's nearly 1 in every 3 people.
You know, that leads to a really fascinating question. What do these millions of people know about relationships, about communication and connection that maybe the rest of us don't? Let's dig in and find out. First things first, we have got to address the biggest point of confusion right away. What is CNM? And maybe even more importantly, what is it not? Let's be absolutely crystal clear here. CNM is not cheating. In fact, they're fundamentally opposites. See, CNM is built on a foundation of enthusiastic consent and total transparency. Cheating? Well, cheating is by its very definition built on deception and secrecy. One is about proactively building trust, while the other is all about destroying it. So what is it then? Well, CNM is basically an umbrella term. It covers any relationship where all partners explicitly, and that's the key word, consent to romantic or sexual connections with other people. That single word, consent, is the entire foundation everything else is built on. And it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Within this big CNM umbrella, you've got a whole spectrum of different structures. Everything from polyamory, which often involves multiple loving, romantic relationships, to something like swinging, which tends to be more sexually focused. It really is all about what the people involved agree to. All right, now for the main event. Let's start tackling the biggest myths about CNM and see what the actual, hard, scientific research has to say. This is where it gets really interesting. Let's start with the biggest assumption out there. The idea that these relationships are just a house of cards, that they're inherently less stable, less committed, and just less satisfying than monogamous ones. But the data, it tells a completely different story. When you look at relationship satisfaction, commitment, passion, all of it, study after study finds no significant difference between monogamous and CNM couples. This directly challenges what researchers call the monogamy superiority myth, this cultural belief we have that one structure is just naturally better. The evidence simply doesn't back that up. Okay, next myth. This is the idea that opening up a relationship is some kind of desperate, last-ditch effort to save a partnership that's already on the rocks. But in reality, when you ask people, their motivations are often not what you'd expect. The top reasons people choose CNM are things like having a larger social network, wanting more honesty in their lives, and fulfilling personal needs for growth. Sexual variety, which so many people assume is the #1 driver, actually ranks much lower on the list. And finally, there's this really harmful stereotype that non-monogamy is basically synonymous with risky, irresponsible sexual behavior. Well, the research actually shows the complete opposite is often true. Because CNM demands open and honest communication about sexual health, practitioners are often more consistent with safer sex practices than people who are cheating in otherwise monogamous relationships. That required transparency, it makes all the difference. So if these relationships can be just as stable and satisfying, what makes them work? Well, it's not an accident. It requires a pretty specific set of high-level skills, especially when it comes to communication. Many people in the CNM community actually use structured tools, like this thing called the RADAR check-in. This isn't about micromanaging each other, it's about creating a dedicated, regular space to talk about feelings, boundaries, and agreements before they turn into problems. It's like proactive relationship maintenance. And this kind of intense communication can lead to a really fascinating emotional experience called compersion. It's often described as the opposite of jealousy. It's that genuine feeling of joy you get when you see your partner happy, even if that happiness is coming from their connection with someone else. It's not something that just happens. It's a skill that many practitioners actively work to cultivate. But let's be real here, this isn't all a walk in the park. This relationship style is not without its serious challenges. It requires an immense amount of work and emotional energy. This is what some people call the complexity trap. And just look at how the numbers explode. A standard couple, that's one relationship to manage. But add just one more person, and suddenly you have 4 distinct relationships to navigate.
Add a fourth person, and it jumps to 11. The emotional and logistical work just grows exponentially.
And on top of that, you have to manage your time and energy meticulously. You have to navigate some pretty significant social stigma, and you have to handle really intense feelings. That includes jealousy, of course, but also something called new relationship energy, or NRE. That's that powerful, intoxicating rush you get from a new connection, which can be really tricky to balance with your existing partnerships. And you always have to guard against situations where one person feels pressured into an arrangement they don't truly want.
So, after all this, what's the big takeaway here? Well, whether you're monogamous, non-monogamous, or somewhere in between, the principles required to make CNM work actually offer some incredibly powerful lessons for strengthening any partnership. Seriously, just think about it for a second. Intentionally choosing your relationship rules instead of just assuming them. Talking about jealousy not as a threat, but as a signal for an unmet need. Making sure both people have their own autonomy and independence. I mean, these are skills that can supercharge any relationship, no matter what its structure is. And ultimately, the research is really clear on this. Relationship happiness isn't really about being monogamous or non-monogamous. It's about closing the gap between the relationship you have and the relationship you truly want. Authenticity, not a specific structure, seems to be the real key to satisfaction. So that really leaves us with a powerful question to ask ourselves for any relationship we're in. What rules are you simply assuming are in place, and which ones have you actually actively chosen together? The answer to that question just might be the key to a much stronger bond.